Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 6th-round post-fight show with me, Zane Simon. I am joined once again here with Dayne Fox coming at me to talk about this UFC Copenhagen card that just went down in Denmark. Jared Cannonier upsetting Jack Hermansson in a middleweight top contenders bout, and to polish off a card that, as advertised on paper, was pretty fun top to bottom.
Absolutely. Once the main card kicked in, the finishes started coming in, the violence started coming, and the main event delivered beyond my expectations, to be honest with you. And the expectations were pretty solid for me, so I'm incredibly happy with the way this card played out.
Yep. Not a card with any one huge fight that everybody would show up for and have to see. Our traffic for the night, I believe, or for the day reflected that.
Yeah. We
weren't, people aren't crowding to watch Jared Cannonier or Jack Hermansson or even Gunnar Nelson or, Lando Venata. It's just that none of them have the recognition to really pull in the viewers. But for people who sat down and watched it, even if the prelims were full of decisions, full of close decisions, some really weird judging, some bad scoring, stuff like that, they still all felt like there were a lot of meaningful fights down there, a lot of stuff to take away from it, and then a couple of big thrilling stoppages too, and the main card was just all fun.
Yeah. Yeah, there was some quirky stuff, some weird stuff, like how in the hell is it that there's 6 Von Flue submissions in the UFC's history and 4 of them go to one person? I mean, good hell.
We got to rename the choke.
Yeah, I mean, let's give due honor to Von Flue, so we'll keep the Von in there, but Von Preux.
It's the Von Preux. What I call it at this point. I called even when I saw, I was like, oh, he gets the Von Preux choke. Like, I don't even think about it anymore at this point. It's not like, oh, I'm trying to do it to like slip it in and lever the public into calling it that. It's just, no, that's just what it is. That's
it. It has to be.
It has to be.
Yeah.
But let's get back to this main event.
Agreed.
Jared Cannonier, Jack Hermansson. Hermansson coming out hard early. He knew the game plan. Popping the jab. He jumps in on the takedown. And he's working hard for it, hit that belly-to-back suplex. But you could kind of see, midway through that first round, it's like, this isn't working. He can't hold Cannonier down. And whenever they got up to their feet out in open space, it became pretty clear pretty quick that Hermansson was a little overawed by Cannonier's power standing.
Yeah. And it wasn't just the power either. If there's one word that I could choose to describe Cannonier, it would be composed.
Yeah.
He knew exactly what Hermansson was going to do. He was ready for it. He expected it. And he also knew what it was that he wanted to do. And once he started executing his game plan, throwing those kicks and landing some of those punches, you could see that they had an effect on Hermansson, and he slowly began to wilt.
Yep. Those leg kicks especially were really cutting out Hermansson's base. And the thing for me has always been with Hermansson, all the way back watching him in Cage Warriors, I believe it was, where he came up. All the way back in Cage Warriors, is that his offense always runs behind his jab. If the jab is working, the offense is working. If the jab's not working, his game falls apart in a hurry. And Cannonier has struggled against a jab. When Hermansson threw it, Cannonier struggled with it here. He got hit by it. But it just seemed clear to me that, like, after a couple of minutes, he just didn't want to take the chances on the feet to get hit in return. And at that point, you're letting Cannonier dictate all the pace and the position of this fight.
Yeah. Hermansson, he came out attacking with a lot of low kicks.
Yep.
And I'm not necessarily saying that was a bad idea, but I think if he had mixed that up with the jab, I think he would have been able to slowly get more comfortable with his attack on Cannonier and then get the proper openings for the takedowns. But I'm no expert game planner for for the sport, to be brutally honest. But I felt like that would have provided a better timing for the shots, because most of those seemed rushed. Cannonier knew they were coming.
Yeah, especially by the end of the round, by early in the second round. I mean, that's how, that's what ended up losing him the fight, was getting caught coming in on a takedown, because Cannonier could time it. He could time his entries, and he clipped him with that tiny little uppercut as Hermansson stepped in, and then was able to chase him to the ground and land some brutally hard ground and pound shots. So,
I barely even saw that uppercut. It was so damn sneaky.
Yeah, I initially thought that Hermansson's knee may have given out from all those leg kicks, and that he drove forward and got just like the knee went out and he fell back, and then he just didn't want to fight anymore because the knee hurt too much. That was kind of my first instinct. But then watching it again, you could see that little uppercut sneaks in there and just collapses him. And after that, the follow-up shots made it all pretty academic.
Yeah, I mean, just going off of what the pre-talk hype was, Hermansson was talking about how he was the king of ground and pound. I think he felt obligated to try to prove that, which is probably why he was so anxious to get the fight to the ground. But always a bad idea. Always a bad idea to try to force a narrative into a fight.
Yeah, definitely. Rough loss for Hermansson. Really was on the cusp of being a title contender, and is now going to probably fall back a bit into the middle of that division, where there are a lot of guys that might not necessarily be themselves about to become a title contender, but can give anybody a hard loss on any given night. So you never know at middleweight how, there's always somebody out there like a Derek Brunson or an Ian Heinisch or a Brad Tavares or something like that who, they may be floating around the edges of the top 10, but you catch them on the right day and they can beat a lot of people. So,
yeah.
For
I actually,
though,
I wouldn't mind seeing, I wouldn't mind seeing Brunson and Cannonier go at it next. I mean, Brunson's been really composed in his last couple of fights, and he's still one of the better athletes in the division. Cannonier's going to have to do something to kill time. Yeah,
there's definitely Cannonier's almost certainly not going to rush right into a title shot.
Hell no.
Borchinha is out there waiting for his own shot, and I think people are a lot more interested in that fight.
Yep.
Just on the face of it. Our producer is mentioning the idea that maybe Uriah Hall would be a good matchup for Cannonier. It would certainly be flashy. I mean, Hall is exactly one of those dudes who's like, he's nowhere near contention, but he can beat anybody on any given day.
Yeah, ask Gegard.
Yep. I've also seen mention of maybe Cannonier fighting the winner of
Gastelum Till.
Yeah, of Till Gastelum, which that's not a bad idea either, because that especially for Cannonier that's a high profile fight.
Yes.
Fights against Uriah Hall or against Derek Brunson. Those aren't bad fights, but they don't have any profile for Cannonier. Whereas that would be a fight that could headline a fight night card, where Cannonier would be the dangerous B-side.
True.
And, that might be even a role he's more comfortable in. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see something like that get made. But there are definitely plenty of, with Brunson and Hall both picking up big recent wins, there are fights in that division in the top 10 if he's just going to be treading water for him to take out there.
Oh, absolutely. Hell, even Yoel Romero's floating out there.
Yeah. And that would definitely be the kind of fight where, you're taking it purely off the profile. Like, that's a dangerous fight for Cannonier if he's trying to become a title contender. But he also, you heard him post-fight, he's got a level of belief in himself that he might take that fight. He might say, I can beat Yoel Romero, so give him to me and we'll make it happen.
Yeah. And I know that there's some out there who would say Romero's dropped 3 of his last 4, but, there were arguments for each of those 3 fights.
He could easily be... Yoel Romero could easily be the middleweight champ right now without a loss to his name in recent memory.
Exactly.
So... he and Cannonier, that could be a hell of a fight.
I'd love to see it.
Just before that, co-main event, Mark Madsen, Danilo Belluardo, and you got to think that the UFC got exactly what they hoped for out of that performance, by especially putting Madsen in the co-main event like that for his UFC debut. You're going to have a 34-year-old or 35-year-old former Olympian that you're pushing into the co-main event on a regional fight night card. You want him to shine big and to show up immediately as somebody people are talking about in that division. And Madsen did that, stomped Belluardo in just over a minute.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely nothing to complain about with his in-cage performance. That was beautiful, but a couple of things that leave me hesitant before jumping on the bandwagon with him. Number one, Belluardo has no business being in the UFC. He was put there for Madsen to do exactly what he did. So we can't put stock in that. But, I mean, like you said, it was what the UFC wanted. And then as far as his, I mean, sure, he'll probably work for Scandinavia area and Denmark because he is Danish. But I have not seen very many post-fight interviews that were more dry to the point where I need some water because my mouth. Oh, wait, no, he did mention that in his interview.
Yeah. Yeah, the post-fight speech left a little to be desired. I love that. What's next for you? Well, I need some water because my mouth is dry. And then I think he realized as he was saying that how dumb it sounded, because then he immediately is like, no, I'm the hardest worker in the room. There's a new hardest worker in the room. It's me. He got to a little bit of promo there. I think it's just probably one of those things where, especially after a really long Olympic level wrestling career, like it's just not the kind of sport where you call people out. And to say we haven't seen some collegiate and very elite high-level wrestlers who are super competitive and used to calling people out. Ben Askren, Daniel Cormier, obviously they love getting on the mic. Colby Covington too. But for Madsen, especially focus on it's like you go to the Olympics and you're like, I want to fight that dude. We're you and me next tomorrow. It's like, no, it's a bracket.
No, absolutely true. The Olympic wrestling scene is completely missing the professional wrestling aspect of it that mixed martial arts adds to it. But
maybe he'll work on that.
Yeah. I was like, dude, this is your platform. You needed to up your game a little bit there. Everything in the cage was beautiful. That's the biggest complaint that I have right there.
Yeah, and I think honestly too, like. As you say, Belluardo may not have a lot of business being in a UFC level fighter at this point, but I think it was a totally fine matchup for Madsen in that, like, Belluardo's not, he's not a complete can or anything. He's not. And Madsen's pretty inexperienced, so it was just the right kind of opponent for Madsen to show off his game, to come in and be like, look, here's a guy with a decent enough record. I'm better. I'm going to show everybody I'm better. And then the next time out, maybe he hits Don Madge or somebody like that who's already had a couple UFC fights and won a couple UFC fights and showed that he's better than the baseline as they build him up.
Yeah, and especially given that I believe they said this was Madsen's first time at 155 in 19 years. So there was always a possibility that the weight cut could have taken more out of him than he anticipated.
Yeah, and you could quickly, at the bottom of lightweight, he could get into some pretty deep water pretty quick. So it's a soft play introduction, but, it's like Arman Tsarukyan's out there at 1-1 right now at lightweight. And you put him and Madsen in together, and I would pick Tsarukyan every time. Like, it does not take far to go up that division before you're like, you're going to have tougher fights along the way. So UFC, they're going to have to kind of craft a little bit and be like, like I say, maybe somebody like Don Madge, who came out in his last fight and was just like, I'm going to wrestle this fight because this guy's a good kickboxer, and put on a terribly ugly performance, but has a couple wins. That could be the kind of fight that they steer Madsen into.
Somebody like Thiago Moises, tricky on the ground, fairly good all around, but has a little bit of a hole in the wrestling, something like that.
Yeah. they'll build him up a little, get him to a point where he can start. He's had enough wins at a reasonably high level to have a bit of a profile. Then you start sticking him in those tough fights against the guys who very easily can match him in his skill, or at least not obviously just match him in Greco-Roman wrestling, because nobody's going to, but can shut down enough of his wrestling game to force him to have to do other things.
Yeah.
Then you'll start to see whether he's just about to hit a quick ceiling or if he can really blitz his way up into the rankings.
Yeah. And given my Danish heritage, man, I am totally rooting for him.
All right. For that welterweight bout, Gilbert Burns, Gunnar Nelson, and man, welterweight Gilbert Burns is showing up.
Totally. I picked Burns based on the fact he tends to throw more volume than Nelson, and Nelson gets his wins via submission, and I did not think he was going to submit Burns. And what we got out of it was a nice little scramble, nice little fight. I could have seen an argument for Nelson taking 2 of the rounds, because the first and the third rounds were both close, but I feel like the right decision was made with Burns getting it.
Yeah, I don't like that argument. I saw some other people making that argument too, and in the first round, I guess the striking was pretty close. It was actually it was Burns throwing a lot more, and so it seemed like he was landing a lot more, but he's only credited with landing of 11 of 28 strikes to Nelson's 7 of 13. So I guess that's more reasonable, but I kind of felt I felt like I saw Burns landing a lot more in the first round. So to me, Nelson he never had any damaging offense all fight in any way, or even threatening offense. He never even threatened with a submission.
Agreed. I scored at 30-27 Burns myself, but I saw those arguments and I said, yeah, I can see that.
I was willing to give Nelson the third round. I wanted to score at 30-27, but I knew that Nelson would get that third round for all the control time he had, and the fact that the striking was not anything of interest for either fighter.
Yeah.
So I knew he was going to get that round, but I would also agree that in general, all the threatening in that fight that happened was all done by Burns, and I'm happy to see him get the win. And he, pushing himself into the rankings at welterweight, where it seems like, maybe the lack of weight cutting is helping his durability. He didn't look at all fragile.
No.
Maybe having a little speed edge is cleaning up his striking a little, making it look a little prettier against his opposition. He seems fast and composed out there, where at lightweight he was just kind of very middle of the pack. Mm-hmm. And he's still an incredibly good technical wrestler and grappler. So,
can we highlight that flying knee in the second round? Number one, Burns throwing it and Nelson eating it. Damn.
Yeah.
Whew.
That was
beautiful.
Pretty. Now, he called out Neil Magny, which is a good call out, because Magny, for some reason, still has a spot in the top 15 and has had huge troubles with good top grapplers.
Yes.
But I really want to see Gilbert Burns fight Li Jinglong.
Ooh, I'd totally be down for that. I didn't even think about that one.
Because Jinglong should, by all rights, have that 15 spot. Burns could get it now. I wouldn't be mad about that. But they're the people who are really nipping at that spot at the bottom of the welterweight rankings. And I'd love to see them face off.
Oh, yeah. No, and I think that Jingliang would have the he could possibly drag Burns into a brawl. And Burns hits hard as hell. He
does.
The other name I was thinking before you threw out Jingliang was Chiesa, but I think that the striking would be more one-sided in favor of Burns. But yeah, I like Jingliang better.
That Chiesa fight, that would be a profile fight for Burns, where it's that's the kind of fight he's probably more likely targeting, just because Chiesa is somebody that people know. He had a ranking at lightweight. He was on The Ultimate Fighter. He's familiar to a lot of people, so I could easily see Burns going after a fight like that. Moving further down the card, Ion Cutelaba picked up one of 4 performance of the night bonuses, I believe, if I'm just remembering what our producer told me now, and I already forgot. Him, OSP, Jared Cannonier, and Jack Shore, no fight of the night tonight. But, man, Cutelaba, I thought cardio would be the defining factor here, but Cutelaba made it clear that Khalil Rountree may have gotten way better at Muay Thai, but there are still a lot of gaps in that game.
I'll give some credit to Rountree because he got up pretty quickly after those first couple of takedowns, but nothing else went right for him. I actually picked this upset. I'm kind of surprised I did because I did so horrible on the card in general. But Cutelaba he stays up in people's faces. He doesn't back down, and that doesn't give Rountree much room to get his kicks or his range boxing going, and that's where he's at his strongest. So, it was a bad matchup for Rountree.
I was honestly surprised to see Rountree as like a reasonable favorite in this fight.
Yeah,
I know Cutelaba was coming off a loss, but we've seen Rountree struggle with pressure and with pace a lot over his career, and his last win was a good one, but Eric Anders neither has pressure nor pace to his game. So
none whatsoever.
Yeah. But Cutelaba, I mean, the big thing to me here is really just him showing up with a multi-layered offensive wrestling attack, and then that ground and pound was crushing from on top. Just brutal shots. And, I think that's where the real, like I said, I think that's where the real credit has to be given, because I thought this would be about pressure and pace, but it was really just about Cutelaba showing up with a good wrestling and good ground striking attack.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for him, I think light heavyweight is really kind of locked up right now, pretty booked up. So he might have to wait around for a fight. Wait to see somebody win.
The winner of Span Clark, I think, would make sense.
Yeah, or I was thinking maybe Lungiambula versus Ankalaev.
Oh, I didn't think about that one. Yeah. Yeah, that would totally work.
If it's Lungiambula, you're in for two dudes swinging absolute hammers at each other, and then Ankalaev is a pretty deft, technical, tough fighter to beat.
Yeah.
Earlier, just before that, another light heavyweight bout: Ovince St. Preux, Mikhail Alexeyjuk, and man, that Von Preux choke. Just flowing like wine for OSP in the light heavyweight division. Bouncing back from a couple rough losses. Credit to him. He said that he had he trimmed down a little. His weight cut was easier. He was managing his physique a little better, and that he felt better. And I was worried pretty early about him gassing out. He looked like he was not keeping pace with Alexeyjuk at all. But it was pretty clear in the second round that it was Alexeyjuk struggling with OSP's size and wearing himself down just with the insane pace he tried to put on him in that fight.
Yeah, that is true. And I think it would have worked if he would have followed the one simple rule that anybody who ever fights OSP should know. Do not go for a guillotine on him.
He didn't. To his credit, he didn't. He hit the ground with his arms on his side. OSP punched him in the body a couple times, and that's when Alexeyjuk lifted his arm up, and OSP just slid his head under it. I think it was a pretty, actually, at that point, it's just OSP goes for that choke so much that if you even flail a little, he'll just put himself in position for it.
I must have missed that part. I mean, it always seems to happen fairly quickly with OSP, and to Alexeyjuk's credit, he actually lasted longer than I think most of his other opponents have in that choke.
And don't get me wrong, I still think it has a lot to do with Alexeyjuk being lost off his back on the ground. I just think that it was more him flailing than him actually going for a guillotine there.
Okay. Yeah. I think I might have been a little distracted at that point, so I'm sure you're right on that one.
Yeah. But, you look at the stats for this, and Alexey landed 33 of 59 strikes in the first round, just absolutely drowning OSP in volume. And I think, the thing that really showed off the point where you could see that the momentum was switching around cardio was that when they started to fall into the clinch at the end of the first and into the second, OSP really started cracking Alexey hard.
Yeah.
And it just became a thing where OSP's size and his just a little bit more composure there really paid off big.
Yeah. And, regardless of the outcome, I still say that I'm more excited about Alexey moving forward than I am OSP.
Well, yeah, we've seen OSP fight literally almost every top 15 light heavyweight in the world at this point. We know how he matches up with all of them. We know who he loses to. We know who he wins against and why. It's when you get a veteran who's been around in the UFC as long as he has, it's going to be hard to be like, oh, I got to see this fight next.
Yeah. And at this point, trying to match up OSP, it's almost like, okay, well, who hasn't he fought?
He's lucky because he hasn't fought Misha Serkinov, who just won. So that booking should be pretty obvious. Yeah.
Aside from that, the other fighters near the top of the division, it would be Johnny Walker and Anthony Smith, and that's about it.
Yeah, and he's not about to get that Anthony Smith fight because Smith is now ranked way up at the top of the division, and Walker is much more likely to run into that same stratosphere in a hurry than he is drop back down and be fighting OSP.
Yeah. But even in the loss, promising performance from Alexey. I love the body work early. I thought that was intelligent, trying to wear out St. Preux, but he outworked himself, so to speak.
Yeah, and we've seen Nikki Thrills come out and lose that same way to OSP and then come back 3 or 4 years later and beat him. So it's not like Alexey doesn't have the time and the basic skill set to really improve his game a lot. It's just, light heavyweight grappling, man. It is kind of a wasteland.
Yeah, speaking of Nikki Thrills, him and Alexey would probably be a lot of fun.
It would. Absolutely. That brings us to a welterweight bout. One of those things that, man, I'm so happy about this and I'm so mad about it at the same time, and I do not need any of that conflicting emotion in my life. Nicolas Dalby beat Alex Oliveira, and all credit to Nicolas Dalby because he did go out and win this fight.
He did what he was supposed to do. He got an opportunity. He got put in a bad spot immediately after that again and fought his way out of it and threw it for the win. Mm-hmm. He worked to win the fight. There's no discredit to him. But man, did that ref screw Alex Oliveira. Yeah, I was going to say that you could apply the word robbery to this contest, and I wouldn't have any problem. And the funny thing is, when you say robbery, you normally associate that with the judges, but the judges were absolutely perfect on this one.
For those who didn't watch the fight, I can't imagine why you'd not watch the fights and listen to us first, but Oliveira on top in half guard, not being super active, but being active enough. Throwing shots, keeping Dalby down. Dalby admitted after the fight that he hurt his knee going into the third round. And so, given that too, it's especially unlikely that Dalby would have fought his way back to his feet. When he reversed position after that takedown after that, was because of a sloppy back take to armbar attempt from Oliveira, as Dalby tried to slide out the back. It had nothing to do with Dalby fighting his way off of his back.
Yep.
In a bad spot, and Oliveira, he was a mid-punch when the ref stood them up, and it was all to do with the crowd wholly understanding that Dalby was on his way to losing this decision and just raining down boos, and this ref getting that pressure got to him clearly. He felt like he had to do something to make the fight more exciting for the crowd, and he stood it up, and the resulting, Oliveira was exhausted. He had worked hard to get that takedown, to keep that position, to control that fight, and the next time he went for it, he was a lot sloppier in his grappling, and Dalby was able to get to an advanced position, get into mount, and drop the kind of shots that clearly won the round. It's like I'm saying, Dalby deserved that win. He fought his way through the bad positions and used the opportunities he had to win the fight. Oliveira had more good positions. He could have controlled them to win, but it's hard to look at that fight at all and not think that the ref totally gave Dalby the avenue to make that win.
Well, Dalby deserved the win, but Oliveira did not deserve the loss.
I think
that's a good way to put it. I mean, and the funny thing is that wasn't the first bad call that the referee had either.
No.
He completely missed Dalby's eye poke on Oliveira. I believe it was early in the second round. And he let Oliveira call the timeout. You don't let the fighters call the timeout. I'm not saying that Oliveira didn't get poked in the eye, but the referee's got to be the one in charge of the time on that, and he let Oliveira dictate it.
And then there was There was a pretty bad, was it a cage grab? Or there was something at the end of the second round, too, that...
I think you're right. I can't remember who it was, though, but I just remember...
It was for Oliveira. Oliveira got away with like a cage grab or with something like that at the end of the second round. But it was only with like 5 seconds left, and it didn't really impact the round at all. People, the booth was talking about it like, oh, well, Oliveira got away with one earlier, so it's all fair and fighting and all that. It's like, yeah, these aren't the same thing. I mean, for me, and I've had some arguments about this recently with people, but I know that fights can drag. I know they can get boring. I know nobody wants to see somebody ride out a safe win, but you should only ever be standing somebody up from guard, because guard is a reasonably neutral position where if the fighter on top isn't clearly looking to advance position, then you're standing both fighters out of something where neither of them has a clear advantage. Anytime a fighter can pass out of guard, they pass to half guard, side control, back control, any of those things, they are in a clearly advantageous grappling position that they worked hard to get, and you shouldn't be taking it away from them. Yeah.
And I don't know. It was egregious. Clearly, Dalby owes part of his win bonus to that referee. But I don't know, to try to give Dalby a little bit more credit, he had the most dominant round in the fight when he just completely pounded away on Oliveira in the second round.
Yeah. No, like I said, Dalby worked his way for that loss, or for that win. It was a great, hard effort win for Dalby, and he seems like a fantastic guy. He's got a great story, battling back from alcoholism and depression to turn his career around, get back to the UFC. He walks out, he walks out to his wife singing the national anthem. Like, I was just in my mind, I'm thinking Tai Tuivasa, JDS in New Zealand, where Tuivasa's walking out with all the dancers doing the haka and all that, and I'm just like, and then he loses, and he was just like, this was supposed to be my moment. Mm-hmm. This was supposed to be my time. And it was kind of crushing, and I kept thinking, like, oh no, we're not going to see this again, are we? But Dalby fought hard. He fought his way. He fought every minute of that fight for the win. It's just that the ref colored the ref colored the avenue of the fight and how the opportunities that Dalby got.
Now, one of the differences between Dalby and Tuivasa's still young, not in control of his emotions. Dalby was composed the whole time. So, I mean, like you said, he very easily could have lost that had the referee not interfered. But, credit to Dalby. He did what he needed to do to win. And, rather than focus on the bad part about it, let's focus on the good about it. It's a feel-good story, and I don't see Oliveira getting hurt by this loss at all.
Yeah, he's more like it. We still don't know what happened with his whole kidnapping child, assaulting ex-girlfriend thing. So that's more likely to have an impact on his career than this loss. The UFC is probably going to treat like a win for him.
Agreed.
Although that is 3 straight losses for him. So if that police case is still hanging over his head in any way, the UFC could easily just use this as a good excuse to just cut ties.
True. Very true.
Middleweight bout before that, John Phillips, Alen Amedovski. And, man, watching tape on this one, I was just like, Alen Amedovski's going to fight the exact wrong fight to beat John Phillips, right? And he did. He absolutely just walked out there and got clobbered. And the thing is, too, that it's not like John Phillips has great defense for strikes or anything like that. Amedovski was clearly outlanding Phillips for the first 10 seconds of that fight. It's just John Phillips, like, you can watch him punch, you watch him connect. He's not a dude you want to go out and swing and trade haymakers with. It's the terrible idea.
Oh, he's one of the last ones that you want to do that. I mean, I understand that, Amedovski likes to fight that way, and that's why the UFC signed him, is because he is prone to fight that way.
Mm-hmm.
But, he's got the better wrestling. I think he had the better grappling. I haven't seen a whole
He
lot
had
of
to. I mean, with Phillips, it really is just Phillips has the better hit you hard with hooks in the pocket. Not form on the hooks, not technique, not defense, not pocket boxing, none of that. Just the better hit you hard.
He's got a chin and he's got power. And and the way that Amedovski fought him, that's exactly what allowed Phillips to take the win. Because like you said, he had the red marks on his face after the fight to show that Amedovski hit him hard a couple of times. But Phillips ate it and he kept going. Yep.
It's just right in his wheelhouse, and the dude swings hammers at people. So
I am curious about Phillips. One thing, though. When did he become the Welch wrecking machine?
I don't know. Somewhere in there, I think somebody's just pulled him aside and was like, dude, the white Mike Tyson thing does not work for you. Don't.
I heard that, and I'm like, when the hell did they switch that up? But whatever.
Yeah. If it works for him, it works for him. I have to say I am really happy to see him get his first UFC win. As he said afterward in the cage, this was the happiest moment of his entire life to date.
Yeah.
Dude is living in a room in John Kavanaugh's house. He was living in a trailer out behind it before that. Like, I'm happy for the guy. He needed this win.
Yeah. And his back was against the wall. He had dropped his first 3 UFC appearances. He's a lot of fun. He's not the most skilled guy, but he's a lot of fun. And that he's one of those types that he puts everything he has into this sport. So I totally agree with you. Good to see him get a win.
And he's also, I think, very clearly a guy who will show up for any UFC card against any opponent on any kind of notice and take the fight. So that's why they've kept him around,
Yeah.
That brings us to another middleweight bout just before that. Makhmud Muradov, Alessio de Chirico, and a decent showing in his debut for Muradov as a relative newcomer to the UFC. Dude has a ton of fights to his record already. He's just 29, but his record is 23-6 now.
29 fights in 29 years. That's impressive.
Yeah, I was hoping on his UFC. His wiki doesn't have it yet, but I was hoping to see exactly how long he's been fighting. But
professional debut was 2012.
2012. So that's a pretty high pace too. Like 7 years in, he's getting to the UFC right in the peak of his career, right in the prime, with a ton of experience. And he looked composed. He looked fast. He gassed pretty hard by the end of the fight. But I know, he had a really bad last minute of that fight against Alessio de Chirico.
Yeah.
But I honestly probably would have given him that third round too. He wobbled de Chirico in the third. He's still out. No, I guess de Chirico did outland him down the stretch. I thought he outlanded de Chirico too in the live stat numbers. But all right, de Chirico, he can get that last round. That's fine. I thought he outlanded him, but he clearly way outpaced de Chirico early in the fight. And It was just a good, solid, well-rounded showing for a guy making his UFC debut.
Well, to defend Muradov a little bit on the gassing, he did take the contest on short notice. So I can give him a little bit of leeway there. And
it like triple up or double and triple up on Chirico in those first 2 rounds for volume. So, and
if we're being totally fair to Chirico, he actually looked a lot better in this contest than he did against Kevin Holland. I was like, okay, do we want to keep Chirico around after that fight? But after this one, I'm hoping he sticks around on the roster. He's still got enough for me to say, okay, I'm interested in this guy.
I doubt he's going to get cut off 1 loss. I mean, he won his last 2. Well, I guess off 2 losses now. Yeah, it could happen. But as long as fighters are willing to take fights on short notice, and I can't imagine Chirico's getting a lot of money for he's probably going to stick around. These days, that seems to be the biggest thing for the UFC is really just are you available to fight all the time? Then you can hang around and get more fights.
That's true. There's a lot of truth to that. But yeah, he looked worlds better than he did against Holland. He was timing his counters pretty well enough that I thought the quality of his punches in the first round were better than what Muradov was winning, to the point where towards the end of the round I wasn't 100% sure who I wanted to give the round to. But I think that the right decision was made to give Muradov the win. I'm not saying I picked Chirico by any means, but it was a good showing by him, good showing by Muradov. A lot of aggression shown by Muradov, throwing in combination damn near the entire fight.
And he looks fast. I mean, that's the big thing for middleweight. He looks like a very natural, flowy athlete.
And, of course, we have to mention the fact that he's represented by Floyd Mayweather. So it's just because of that fact, I can't help but have some interest to see where his career goes.
Yeah, I mean, if he ever gets up towards big fights and headlining cards, you might see Floyd ringside. Middleweight, let's see, further down the card, welterweight bout, Ismail Naurdiev, CR Bahadurzada, and this, I think, was the performance Naurdiev needed after that terrible Chanceman counter fight, where he knew exactly how dangerous Bahadurzada was, and just fought a smart, composed fight in all areas, kept the fight long, kept his kicks busy, out-wrestled Bahadurzada every time he got any momentum going. Solid performance.
Yeah, he swarmed Bahadurzada, kept him on his back foot early in the fight. And Bahadurzada, I don't know if there was any injuries or whatever with Bahadurzada, but he didn't look like the same fighter that fought a war against Curtis Millender last year. He looked slow.
I think it's just the time and age for a fighter who's always depended on having lightning quick hands and big power more than anything.
Oh yeah, and he's not that old. I mean, 35 is up there, but it's not. That shouldn't necessarily be ancient. But he's also been fighting since he was a teenager.
Yeah, he's been fighting since 2002. He's 17 years into his career at this point.
Yeah.
So, he had to start slowing down sooner or later. And when your style is so based off hand speed like his is, the moment you take even a little bit off, the moment people can see your punches coming just a little bit better, and you lose that sneaky surprise for the knockout, you get fights like this. Yeah, and it was flat-footed. People start picking you off.
Yeah, it was totally one-sided. One-sided.
Tough fight for him. Great fight for Naurdiev, though. He won that Prazeres fight, and the run counter fight was kind of a weird booking off that Prazeres win. But it's clear. It was pretty clear from this booking that the UFC still is very much looking at Naurdiev as somebody that they're gonna keep giving name fights and name opponents to.
Yeah, and he's still young enough that we could attribute his loss to rencounter as just youthful mistakes or however you want to put it. He's still got a long way to go as far as his upside. So good to see him rebound. I think that he's somebody that the UFC can invest some time into to hopefully get a Austrian star, so to speak. Not necessarily a star, but somebody for country of Austria to cheer for.
Yeah, he's going to be a feature on these European cards. He's a fun action fighter.
Yep.
I think the big thing is just really, the run counter fight showed that he's got a lot of scramble in his wrestling game that has come, I think, have been learned tricks of athleticism against smaller or weaker opponents.
Mm-hmm.
And against somebody huge for the division like run counter, it was suddenly like, oh wait, I can't just sweep you off of me because you're too big, you're too rangy, you're too wiry and decent enough an aggressive wrestler that just trying to muscle something against you is just not going to work.
Nope.
Whereas Preux, a former lightweight who's kind of built like a bowling ball, he could roll him over. That was, earlier in the card, just before that, featherweight Giga Chikadze beat Brandon Davis, initially announced as a draw, ended up being a split decision, which is still totally reckless and terrible scoring for one judge to give it to Davis.
Yeah.
I saw somebody mentioning on Twitter that they could find no record of the judge who scored it for Davis having scored it was either who scored it for Davis or who misadded and scored it a draw, having scored a major mixed martial arts fight before. So
doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, but man, this is just an ugly loss for Davis. Chikadze showed up. He's a great kickboxer. He showed good form. His shots landed hard. He flagged hard late and let Davis back in the fight in the third round, which is a concern for him. But Davis could get easy takedowns. He just couldn't make anything of them. And when he got swept in the first round, Chikadze lit him up with some heavy ground shots. So,
oh yeah, and that was just sloppy positioning on the part of Davis when
it was
his back.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that Davis got easy takedowns for the first two rounds. But this is something that really got brought to my attention. One of our writers, Tommy Elliott, wrote the breakdown of the evolution of guard passing in MMA. And he made a real note about looking at Khabib Nurmagomedov's evolution between his fight with Abel Trujillo and his fights later on with his fight with Michael Johnson.
Yes.
And that was where, in that bridge, is where you started to see the leg vine work of Khabib come into play when he would take people down. Because against Trujillo, he set a record for takedowns in the octagon.
21.
And the reason he set that record was because he had no control over Trujillo's legs, and Trujillo just stood back up every time he took him down.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, then, by the Michael Johnson fight, you see the current iteration that we see of Khabib, who always wraps up his opponent's legs on the ground when he gets a takedown.
Yeah.
Mid takedown, he'll have those legs wrapped up so that when they actually hit the ground, their legs are already vined up and tangled up. And you look at the takedowns Brandon Davis is hitting on Giga Chikadze here, and there was no control over the legs at all. And Chikadze just fought his way up every time as soon as Davis tried to open up any striking, and it was a mess.
Well, it's hard to drill positioning when you're running 20 miles a day.
That is going to be the criticism on Brandon Davis for the foreseeable future now.
Yeah. I mean, I still think that Davis can be a fun fighter, but if he ever had a fight gift wrapped to him, this one was it, because Chikadze had shown nothing on the ground in any.
He never won a fight before in MMA. I mean, that's the plain and simple truth of it.
Yeah, no, everybody that was on his record prior to that was a tomato can, 100%.
His only two real fights he took, he lost.
Yep. So I can't help but feel like Davis is on his way to washing out at this point.
Yeah, I mean this is a fight. It's a real referendum on Davis. Yeah. It's just like you had to win this. You really did. And if the UFC is giving you other fights after this, it's going to be only because you're willing to show up.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was about to say. 100%.
So tough loss for him, but this win for Chikadze, it erases almost all of his can crushing because, you know, now he's got a win he can point to. Mm-hmm. Be like, well, he was good enough to beat this dude. And Davis has won fights in the UFC, you know?
Yeah, and he wasn't completely sloppy on the ground. I mean, I'm not saying that he was the better ground fighter, but he was the more disciplined one for sure.
He was the much better top position striker.
Yes.
Unquestionably.
Mm-hmm. Played to his strengths.
Yep. So, you know, if the UFC can keep him away from other fighters that want to wrestle, he'll be a lot of fun. If they can't, he'll probably take some rough losses, but we always knew that with him coming in.
Oh yeah, no, he's gonna. I think he can take the place of Davis in the form of the fun stand-up action fighter at 145 who will take on anybody.
Yep. For that women's bantamweight fight, Lena Landsberg beat Macy Chiasson. I'm a little surprised the judges gave Landsberg this win. I kind of thought that the second round, Chiasson would steal it because she outlanded Landsberg 17 for 13 in total strikes, 6 for 5 in significant strikes, despite giving up a takedown and a couple passes.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that little bit of extra work rate, even though they weren't damaging shots, would push it in Chiasson's favor. It didn't. I'm fine with that totally. But I think this is definitely a real wake-up call loss for Chiasson. Even if she'd won it, this had to be a wake-up call for her. Oh,
absolutely. I think that the home cooking is probably what pushed it in Landsberg's favor because I don't think judges try to take into account the way that the crowd's reacting, but I think that it's something that they inadvertently do quite often in these types of situations. So it
very easily could have been.
Yeah, but I totally agree with you that this had to be a wake-up call for Chiasson. I was thinking that the win over Morass would be a wake-up call because she had more problems with Sarah Morass than she should have. Yeah. And Landsberg clearly was aware of the issues that Chiasson had with Morass and was better equipped to give her more of a fight, and that's exactly what she did. She took it to Chiasson. She endured a hell of a beating early in the fight in the first round, and then Chiasson just started to flag. She started to gas, and Landsberg was there the whole damn time.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, I think the big payoff for Landsberg over her career is she unfortunately for her, she started late, and so at the point she's really kind of everything's clicking. She's 37 now, but it's very much been a thing of like over the course of her UFC career, she's really learned the necessary composure to find her way into and fight her way into good positions over time.
Yep.
And it's paid off with a big win over Tanya Evinger and now a win over Chiasson, who is pretty much the top prospect at bantamweight for a lot of people. And that'll push her up into bigger fights. It could even get her a fight with somebody like Irene Aldana. I would probably lean more on the Betch Kohea side of things. But it's, it doesn't take that many good performances in that division to suddenly be fighting somebody like Marion Renault or Sarah McMahon, who are very beatable opponents and can get you a top contenders bout.
Yeah, no, very true. Very true. I mean, the fact that this win could very well push Landsberg in the top 10 says all you need to know about the depth of this division, because while the fact that I'm impressed that Landsberg got the win, if that's a top 10 fighter, that's kind of sad. But
if I'm looking at the bottom of the top 10 right now in that division, women's bantamweight, we're talking Sarah McMahon, we're talking Macy Chiasson was 11, and we're talking Irene Aldana and Marion Renault, and all of those fighters are very beatable on the right day, even by opponents that are not at all physically comparable to them.
Yep.
You know, we've seen all of them lose to less athletic opponents who just fought hard and pushed through and stayed consistent over multiple rounds.
Mm-hmm. You know, and even with the loss, though, I would still say Chiasson's still the top prospect at bantamweight, just because who else is there?
Yeah, I mean, Aspen Ladd took another hard setback, and she's got a big fight ahead of her against Yana Kunitskaya to reassert herself in that role. But she and Ladd and Chiasson both have they're very decent athletic fighters who just have developed very wild, aggressive games that's needed tempering. And a lot of times very aggressive fighters have to suffer these kinds of setbacks to learn how to control their aggression and to learn how to fight smarter. So it's definitely not a close the door on them, they're done, because they're definitely both decent, strong fighters in that division. Mm-hmm. It's just, you know, they're fighters who are having to learn through losing, not learning through winning.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of the camp that Chiasson's at. Fortis MMA has, I mean, good hell, you've seen the work that they did with Uriah Hall. He seems like he's in the best mental shape that he's ever been in his career. So I think that Chiasson's, her future's still bright.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Lightweight bout before, I mean, to that point too, Landsberg, you know, she lost to Yana Kunitskaya, Aspen Ladd, and Chris. She had her debut against Chris Cyborg.
Yeah.
And now on the back of 2 decent wins, we're talking about she could be like a fight or 2 away from a title shot. This division is very kind to setbacks.
Yes.
And I'm not saying like, or not even a title shot, but a top contender's bout. And I'm not saying Landsberg would win that bout or that she's a viable top contender. She's still she doesn't have a lot of strong offense to her game, but it's a forgiving division.
Yeah. I mean, you know, put her in there with, say, Aldana, say she beats Aldana. I could easily see her fighting somebody like Juliana Pena and Vieira next and being in a contenders fight. Yep,
exactly. That's just it. It's like, it doesn't take a lot to get into a position where you're in a fight where suddenly, you know, it's like Jessica I getting a shot at the flyweight title.
Perfect example. Yep.
All right. Further down the card, lightweight bout, Mark Diakese, Lando Venata. A fight I think people had earmarked to be more violent than it was, but was not. I wasn't like, this was the fight I expected out of it. I gotta say,
I'm with you there,
because both Diakese and Venata have been high flying, violent fighters who've had to learn that is not how you win fights, especially in a division as deep as lightweight.
Yeah, and taking something out of their previous fights heading into this, I took more out of Diakese just tooling up on Joe Duffy than Venata beating Marcos Mariano.
Oh, yeah. Well, you had to.
Exactly. And so Diakese was just totally disciplined in that. Like, I didn't think that this type of fighter existed in Diakese, but somebody got into his head, told him that this is what you got to do. And to his credit, he's listening, and he looks damn good, because at no point did it seem like Venata was in control of this contest.
Yeah, and you even heard it afterward in the post-fight speech too. Diakese's not talking about like, oh, I'm the bone crusher, I'm here to kill everybody, I'm on a tear, I'm gonna wreck everybody, and it's not the confidence of a young fighter who thinks that he's about to destroy the world. It was much more of a like, I'm working my way up, I'm improving constantly, everything is getting better. Everything is clear. It was much more of a fighter who has learned hard lessons and is still confident that he's doing the right things to improve.
Yeah. This is not the same guy who destroyed Timo Pacquiao in 30 seconds. Because after that fight, I'm like, you just wait, buddy. You just wait. Somebody's going to hand it to you. They did, and now that he's had that happen to him, he's humbled, and he's ready to take his lunch bill to work every damn day. And I'm actually really excited to see where Jack Casey is going at this point.
No, it's great. I mean, it's the kind of thing too. Why one of the things when you scout prospects and you're looking at young fighters coming up and on the rise early in this sport, you always top tier athleticism like Diakese has always has to be the biggest thing that you're looking at when you're looking at a prospect, because somebody who's that athletic, they can learn and change and grow their game at almost any point in their career. Like they can just make an adjustment and be like, oh no, I get this now. And suddenly everything changes because they have the potential, their body has the potential to do so many things. And that's, I think that's what we're seeing out of Diakese. And unfortunately for Venata, I think the difference for him was that Diakese came in as this athlete who was very raw, just did not have many technical tools to his game. A power wrestling game, a huge right hand, some wild kicks, but never like a jab, low kick. Oh yeah, jab, cross, uppercut. Here's your tight kickboxing combo. Here's your chain wrestling to, turn the corner, switch from the single to a double, run the pipe, hit the trip on a body lock kind of thing, whatever. It just wasn't that. And that's stuff that he's learned, and it's all clicking in with his athleticism. Whereas for Venata, it felt like he started out with a lot more of that stuff, but the management of it has been the problem. And learning how to manage that is a much tougher skill than learning learning the technical things you need to fight right.
Yeah. And
so
even in the loss, I like the direction that Venata's going as well. He's not just throwing random spinning kicks out there anymore.
Yeah.
But it's just when it comes to stylistic matchup, Jack Casey's build and his wrestling ability was bad news for.
Well,
Venata
it's just the kind of thing that for Diakese, his adjustments lead to easier wins, and for Venata, his adjustments lead to growth, but they're leading to hard losses because. Adjusting for him is having to unlearn the things he knew. Adjusting for Diakese is learning more of the things he didn't know.
Yeah. Venata had a lot of that random from Jackson Wink.
Yep. Just kind of messy, high flying, very pretty and cool in single moments, but it just didn't gel into a style. It made him tired. That was, he would dominate for a round and then just could not keep pace for the next two. And that's why we see, how many dudes get one draw in the UFC, let alone two.
Yep. Yeah.
Great win for Diakese. It's really marking him as somebody. It's marking him as the fighter on his way to a spot in the top 10 that he looked like when he walked in the door. And it's taken some hard fights to get there, but, I could see him fighting somebody like Diego Ferreira or, who's the Russian that Ferreira just beat?
Taisumov.
Yeah, Mirbek Taisumov or somebody like that really soon here, and a win like that getting him, stuck in that bottom, that 15 spot and getting him a bigger fight in the near future,
I'd do that in a fight or two, but I'd say slow play right now. Somebody like Hot Sauce Holtzman, I think, would be a good opponent next.
Sure. It wouldn't really be, I don't know if it would be a big step forward from Venata though. It would just be, I realize you're talking slow play here, but
yeah.
For Diakese, I'm the hype is back on. I'm back ready to be like, nah, throw him in, see what he does, because it's, it feels like his game is clicking, and that's why I want to see take that serious step forward. But you're right, it might just be a push back into trouble where he suddenly finds himself in over his head again.
Yeah, and it's just two different opinions. It's not a big deal, one.
Yep.
So, but yeah, I could see it either way.
that leads us to our opener for this UFC Copenhagen card. Jack Shore, Noeline Hernandez. Dominating performance from Shore. They talked about Hernandez. Felder, I think, really talked up Hernandez changing camps right before this fight. Going out with Tiger Muay Thai and working with them. And I think what this looked like from Noeline Hernandez in this fight was a fighter who had just changed camps. And who suddenly was like, oh, I don't know anything anymore. They've stripped my game down and they're trying to rebuild it from the ground up. And I'm not confident in anything at this point. Because I don't, I feel like he barely threw 10 strikes the whole fight.
Oh, no, he had a deer in the headlights look the whole time. And it looked nothing like the guy that I liked his performance against Marlon Vera.
Yeah.
There was nothing I liked about this.
Yeah, he landed 6 of 36 significant strikes, 9 of 39 through 2.5 rounds before getting submitted.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't know. Maybe I can say the kid stuff, but that's about it. But, all the credit to Shore. His stand-up looked improved. And I'm not just saying that because Hernandez looked like crap. It definitely looked better than he did in his previous fights for sure.
Yep. And I'm still worried a little bit about his, the power in his game, especially in a division like bantamweight where you get a lot of powerful guys. But he's very composed and very tight defensively and tight with his progression on the ground. And the thing I liked seeing was that he fought really hard through some takedown defense to chain takedowns into getting Hernandez to the ground. Mm-hmm. And then once he's on the ground, he's just a really good technical grappler.
Yes.
So
that's
if he can even if he doesn't have the pure shot athleticism, pure dynamism, seeing him fight through and be more technical in his wrestling approach makes me feel like he can make that count for a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I could see his. I could see him climbing to the fringe of the top 10 or something like that.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, he hasn't lost yet, so a great win for him, a great debut for him, and going back up to the top, I say this is a card where even if not every fight was thrilling, most of them were good, but every fight told us something, so it felt like a lot of fun to watch. And it's Saturday morning MMA, which I can't get enough of. So
I'm with you there.
And a big win for Cannonier to top it off, and in one where. I think he's starting to answer between this and the Branch fight. He's starting to answer the questions that have been asked of him early in his career that he was not answering at heavyweight and light heavyweight, namely his wrestling defense and his variety, his striking variety.
Yep.
So if he can keep doing that, yeah, there's a chance for him to be an actual contender at light heavyweight or at middleweight rather.
Well, and now's the time to do it because you got so many that are moving up to light heavyweight.
Yeah, the old guard is
Jacare, Santos. I mean, now is the time. He's very well timed for Cannonier at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, even if your other top contender after Adesanya Whitaker happens is a Paulo Costa, who a lot of people argue did not win his last fight.
If he didn't win it, he didn't lose it either. So
yeah, but I mean but it is as saying it's the right time. Like Costa is the contender people want to see because Costa is thrilling and exciting.
Yes, he is.
He's not the contender that has clearly defined himself as the sole man in the division who could take the title.
Totally agree with that. Yep, totally agree.
So, right place, right time for Cannonier to get a huge win, and fun morning of Saturday MMA.
Yeah. No, I'm always for these types of cards. These cards are a lot of fun.
All right. On that note, you can find me on Twitter at @TheZaneSimon. You can find Dayne on Twitter at @TheDaneFox. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com. Give us a like, subscribe to our shows over on Bloody Elbow Presents on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Stitchers, all that good stuff. Stay tuned for the Level Change Podcast, Mookie Crookie Show, Pull No Punches, the Vivisection, all our other great shows we do day in, day out, all the time. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next week for UFC 243.